Hello friends! Today we're going to be talking about some of the miscellaneous equipment that I haven't covered in any of the previous videos thus far that you might need or want for your Arizona Trail through hike. Stick around. So friends, as you might have noticed, this video looks a little bit different. My camera finally got back to me from the shop, and I'm very grateful to have it back. So hopefully this video looks a little bit better for you guys. Let's get started on the gear. For starters, these are my very most favorite trekking poles I've ever owned. They're the Black Diamond carbon fiber Distance Z trekking poles. And they actually collapse down, so if you don't need them, they're nice and carryable, like so. They're also adjustable for height, and these things are pretty much bulletproof. I know other channels like Darwin on the Trail have talked about collapsible poles and how they don't like them as much. I haven't had any sort of issues. This one got the most wear because I actually started the Arizona Trail with only one, and I found having two helps even more to push you uphill, so I'd highly recommend two. This one was the most used though. I think I used this one 200 miles more than this other one. And the end has gotten chipped off. There are replaceable ends that I could put on here. I just need to get around to doing that. And as you can see back here, this handle is actually held on with a hair tie. This is because in the Grand Canyon, you can see the specific video up here from my hike. A rodent down there, I guess, really was after the salt that was on this and chewed through just the little band that holds the strap onto it. So I sort of made a solution for myself, reattached it using this hair tie, and it worked for me. These poles really are awesome. They're lightweight, and they really do help, especially with a full load of weight on your back, especially as you get further into your day and into your hike. Your legs do a lot of the work for you, but this allows you to use your arms as well in pushing you forward. I'd highly recommend these. Just hiking poles in general. I know these are a little bit pricey. They definitely did work for me though, so I'd highly recommend them. Another little note here, a little trick for you guys. There's duct tape on this part of the handle. Very easy way to carry it so it's not on your back. Just take a roll and be nice and neat. You could also do this with tenacious tape probably. Would highly recommend that little trick. And duct tape comes in handy more than you know it. It can be for repairing gear, can be for patching you up. It's even a decent fire starter. If you have a lighter, duct tape actually burns really well and it could work in a pinch. So that's a little bit on these trekking poles for you. Let's put them back over here. All right, moving on down the line. I did mention this one in one of the previous videos, but this is a Garmin InReach Mini SOS device. So this thing is really awesome. You do need to pay for a plan for it though, unlike a spot device. And you can decide, if you want texting on here or just the instant messages. You get to set like 10 of them or something like that. And you get an unlimited number of those sent no matter what plan you're paying for. Personally, for my hike, I use the Expedition plan, which allowed for unlimited text messages because this can actually link to your cell phone and then you can send messages through it. It's really handy. That definitely is a little bit pricey, but another reason why I got that is you can get weather reports sent straight to this thing, but that uses up one of your text messages, and I wanted to have that capability for the whole trail. And staying in touch with family and friends helps you feel a little bit less isolated. And especially fall on the Arizona Trail, isolation can be a little bit more of an issue. So I'd highly recommend one of these little InReach devices. Clip it right up here on your pack, and it can really save you in a pinch. It has little SOS button on the side here, and this is included in any of the Garmin plans you would pay for. And you push this little button, and that calls in the cavalry. Someone is going to be looking for you. You just have to be really particular about who you set as your emergency contact. Because when you push that button, the search and rescue people are going to reach out to your emergency contact and say, hey, we got this emergency beacon flare in this area. Does that sound right to you? Should we send in help? And it is up to that person who you set as your emergency contact to say, yes, send in help, or no. So choose that person wisely. Moving on down the list. This is a Thermarest Z-Lite sit pad. This thing hardly weighs anything at all, but it definitely cushions your butt. In fact, I'm going to use it right now. Some people use these, like a full-length one of these, as their sleeping pad. Personally, I couldn't imagine doing that because any little rock or something I feel would be very painful to me, being I'm a side sleeper. But these little sit pads definitely do come in handy, and they weigh just about as much as an inflatable variant, believe it or not. I actually started with one of the Climate inflatable sit pads at the beginning of the trail, and it popped about halfway through in the Mazet cells. This thing doesn't pop, weighs about the same. Hello friends, sorry for the brief intermission. My Sony camera couldn't handle the 107-degree heat where I'm recording right now. Whatever, stuff happens. I'll be talking a little bit more about my camera equipment and electronic equipment I carried with me on my hike more extensively next week. But as I said, sorry for the brief intermission and the changing of cameras. Back to the video. So back to this Thermarest sit pad. When I was out in the Mazet cells, to that point, which is just before mile 400 for a southbounder, I was using one of those inflatable sit pads from Climate, and it ended up popping on me. They're just not ruggedized enough for the sharp environment. So a solution like this definitely works to keep your butt from falling asleep if you're having to sit on a log or something, and it doesn't weigh much. So it might be something you'd be interested in. I know I also used it underneath of my sleeping pad when I was having deflation issues, and that did help a little bit. Moving on. Here's a backpacking pillow. I actually carried an inflatable one on my hike, but I can't seem to find it right now. Being I haven't gotten to go on a good backpacking trip for like 2 months due to all this quarantine business, some of my gear is a little bit strewn about, but a backpacking pillow can definitely make a difference. I know a lot of folks just say, oh, stuff your clothes in a stuff sack and you'll be fine. Maybe. The thing is, your sleep is really important on the trail, so that's something that you want to take very seriously. And small inflatable pillows, unlike this one, hardly weigh anything, and they can have even the plushy design on the inside so it stays nice and snuggly. You really need to take your sleep seriously out there because that's when your body is doing a lot of its repair. So a good night's worth of sleep is definitely worth a lot more than a few more ounces. So I'd highly recommend perhaps going and using one of those. Another great miscellaneous item, a big heavy-duty garbage bag. This thing probably weighs like an ounce altogether, and this could be an emergency rain poncho. This can be an internal pack liner to keep your gear dry. This can be an emergency shelter. This can be an emergency rainwater catch. This can be a lot of different things. So I'd highly recommend maybe just throwing one of these in your bag. They stuff down to just nothing, and they can really come in handy in a lot of different ways. But I highly recommend carrying a garbage bag. Moving on down the line, a Right in the Rain journal. So this has special paper that actually, if it gets rained on, it's not going to get all wrinkly and gross on you. And they sell pens and pencils that can be used with this. Pens specifically that won't bleed if it gets wet. And initially these Right in the Rain journals came out for different tactical field uses. So in the back there's all this different information on what the different symbols mean. Might be interesting, something to read when you're out there. And if nothing else, it's a really good way to write down notes or maps or ideas, anything you need. And as I was saying, they do sell waterproof pens. They're like 10 bucks a pop though. A simple mechanical pencil probably will weigh just as much, and lead doesn't really bleed, so you don't have to worry as much about that. Just be sure you pack a little bit of extra lead or load this thing up good before you head out. My very first jaunt out on trail, like 5 days, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna journal, this is gonna be a great idea. Click, click, click. Oh, I'm out of lead. Great. I'm just carrying a weight. So you definitely want to be sure you have that dialed in and be sure on that before you go and do this. But I'd highly recommend writing your thoughts down, because when you're in that mindset of the trail, it's a hard mindset to get back into when you're back home. So having a good reminder of what you thought, felt, smelled, felt, whatever, one of these notebooks can definitely help bring you back to that mindset. So I'd highly recommend that. It is a little bit heavy, whatever. Now some of the miscellaneous electronic equipment. So I'm keeping next week's video about the recording stuff and the lengths I had to go to in order to produce the trail time episodes from out on the Arizona Trail. This is going to be kind of just covering the standard electronic gear that you'd want for your hike. It's not touching the recording stuff, any of that. That'll be next week. So this is a little bit more for the generalized hiker. A good headlamp, specifically one that can be recharged out there. I found this BioLite headlamp to be very, very nice, because as you wear it, the battery pack is in the back and then the light is in the front. So this distributes the weight a lot better across your head. So for us thru hikers, that night hiking is definitely something we frequently do. Having that little bit of comfort where the weight's distributed around your head makes hiking a lot more comfortable with something like this. It has adjustable sizing. It's very, very bright. It's the brightest headlamp I've ever owned, and these things aren't that expensive. I think they're between $30 and $40. As long as your battery bank is charged up, you have extra batteries for this thing. It's sweat resistant. I've worn this through the rain a little bit. It does a really good job. And it's never run out of battery on me. I think the longest I hiked with this thing was 2 or 3 hours. And at that point, even though it was decently cold out, it had only burned through half of its battery. So would highly recommend this headlamp. It served me very well on my hike. And it's a very nice headlamp. It has floodlight and spotlight, strobe light, and a red light all built into it. And that's pretty much all you're ever going to need for a headlamp like this. And it's all adjustable brightness. So really, really good headlamp. Highly recommend it. As I said, a power bank. I believe this is an Anker 13,000 milliamp hour battery. And this thing really kills it. One of these little packs, and of course you want your whatever charging cables also in with it. Definitely comes in handy, so that when you hit town you can recharge this, and when you're in the field you can recharge all the things that you need to recharge. I carried 2 battery banks, one 13,000 and one I think it's 21,000 milliamp hour, and that definitely handled all of my power needs. I'll talk a little bit more about these next week though. Would highly, highly recommend one of these though, because when you're using your phone for GPS and all that sort of stuff, it's definitely going to burn through that battery really quick. So having a way to top that off and ensure that you have your maps available to you, kind of important. On top of that, you might want some of these little power bricks, so when you do hit a trail town and you decide to zero either at someone's hiker hostel or at a motel or something, you have the means to charge up all of your stuff. So you want ways to actually interface with civilization's power grid as well. Moving on, headphones. Oh my God. Probably at least 8 hours of every day I spent listening to music out there. You can find the playlist that I listen to over on Spotify. If you look me up, Jacob Eberspacher, you look up my playlist, 803 Miles. Note, not all the songs on there are clean, but it's what inspired me when I was out there and got the miles under my feet. And I would have been completely at a loss if I didn't have these. Obviously, if you're walking on a really busy road or something, it's probably good to have one of them out at least so you know what's going on around you. You don't want to be completely oblivious to the world by having your music that loud or being that just blocked out. So definitely something to consider, but there are some precautions you should take. Times when you should, times when you shouldn't use them. And these were also really nice late at night when I had nothing better to do, just to keep my mind off of how I was entirely alone or isolated or whatever. These distract the mind, and that is, in my opinion, the hardest challenge, especially in a fall through hike, is keeping your brain distracted from all of the horrible what-ifs that could happen out there. That was an extremely important tool. Would highly recommend that. This probably should have been in the toiletries episode, but whatever. But toilet paper and a good trowel. Really important things, and a plastic bag to kind of keep the nasty stuff in here and to keep it waterproofed. Just to walk you through the kit really quick, obviously toilet paper, and then this is what's known as a deuce of spades. Obviously there's a little bit of mud on there, but this is a titanium trowel. These things, let's see, is the weight on here? 0.6 ounces for this thing, and I have not been able to bend it or anything like that. It flexes a little bit, but it's made out of titanium. It's super lightweight, and it'll dig a good hole for you. And remember, friends, in case you haven't heard of the Leave No Trace stuff about how to poop in the woods, you want to dig a cat hole that's 6 to 8 inches deep, and that's where you bury your waste. And you're going to want to pack out any wet wipes. There's kind of debate as to whether or not you should pack out your toilet paper. If it's a really heavily used area, you probably should. Yeah, that kind of wraps it up for... Oh, and in the desert, you want your hole to be 4 to 6 inches deep because it relies more on the sun's heat to break down all that stuff. Yeah. Okay, moving on. This is what's known as the Luci or Lucy 2.0 solar light. And what this thing does, it fills up with air, just like that. Little solar panel on top, so you hang this off your bag, and it'll charge as you walk. You might want to top your bag for a fall hike because the back of your bag is going to be primarily in the shade your whole southbound hike. And that's, I wouldn't recommend using solar panels to charge your stuff for that exact reason. For a southbound hike, there's going to be shade on your back, so unless you're wearing that solar panel right here in front of you, it's probably not going to do much work for you. It was enough to keep this recharged though, and if I got to camp early enough, I'd set this out and let it charge. This thing would hang perfectly from little center hook in my tent. It has 3 different brightnesses, and this did more than enough to light my tent at night. And as I've said in other videos, in the fall, it's really a fight against time because that sun, when it goes down, it is cold. And it is setting earlier and earlier as your hike goes on in the fall, instead of longer and longer in a spring hike. So to be prepared for the temperature differences that brings, the challenges of getting your miles in the right amount of time matters, the mental struggles like I was just talking about with the headphones, it's definitely a little bit more accentuated being you're in darkness for longer. So having some gear like this doesn't weigh too much, it's a few ounces, and it breaks down really easy. Would highly recommend this as a piece of your kit. Another miscellaneous that you might want this is a bug net. There weren't really any parts of the trail that I really felt that I needed this, and to be honest, I didn't carry this my whole hike. I don't know if I carried it at all, to be honest, but it's a bug net. Keeps the bugs away, or at least keeps them from biting you. It could also be a fish trap if you need it to be for some survival stuff. Hopefully you don't encounter any of that while you're out on the trail. It really wasn't that buggy for me. aside from a couple of areas. So take it or leave it. It doesn't weigh much at all. And for other trails like the Appalachian, you might want to consider this a little bit more. Not so much for the Arizona Trail though. I don't know. Take it or leave it. Trust your gut. A lighter. This probably should have been in the cooking video, but having a good lighter, it really helps, especially to light your stove, or if you're going to be having a fire out there because it gets cold. Just be sure you have means to put out that fire before you start it. Yeah, a little lighter. Comes in handy. More than you know it. And if you end up in a survival situation, obviously, that's more than worth its weight in gold. Moving on. I said, I think in last week's video, that you'd probably want to carry some rope. Here's my bear bag setup. Little carabiner. This is what I would clip onto that big blue food bag from last week. And then the other end, I would usually tie a branch to it or something, so I'd have enough weight to throw it up and over high enough and slender enough tree branch. This also could come in handy. I kept this in my brain of my backpack always. Comes in handy for all sorts of different things. Rope is really, really, really important, and it can get you out of a lot of situations, can help you through a lot of situations. I can do a whole video on some of the knots I used out there. If y'all are interested, just let me know. I know some of those videos can be very dry and boring, and I'll try my best to make that not the case, but rope. Also a few extra carabiners. You never know what you might want to clip off your backpack, whether that's your water cache bags or your food bag or little solar lights or your Garmin. You know, just being able to quickly attach stuff really makes a good difference. And these don't weigh all that much, especially if you get some of the lighter weight versions. Moving on. A wallet. To carry all your money, ID, insurance cards, whatever else you might need out there. You don't need a really crazy thick wallet with all your different like membership cards or whatever. Just pare it down and get something nice and slender. This is the one that I used for my hike, and it definitely worked out for me. Another item, actually this watch. Might want one of these. Telling the time is good. Knowing the date and the day of the week is good. This watch, I think it was 30 or 40 bucks off of Amazon, and it also has an altimeter, a thermometer, and a barometer. So this definitely has a bunch of uses. You just have to calibrate it all, and that was kind of the hard part when you're out there in the middle of nowhere and you're like, huh, is the pressure dropping here? Is it going to be stormy? Is it going to be sunny? What's this looking like? And if you don't have that already dialed in and you have to go and Google search the barometric pressure for your area, it kind of defeats the purpose. So it's better to dial this in every time you hit a town, every time you know your elevation to a T. Dial in your elevation, dial in your barometric pressure. The temperature kind of handles itself, but you know, you could leave this in a sleeve of your tent or something, and you can know, 3 in the morning, oh my God, I'm shivering so much. What temperature is it? Pull this out, look at it. Oh, I know it's 20 degrees or whatever. So this definitely comes in handy. And you can set alarms for yourself. So for example, I always like checking how far I would get at noon, because usually that's like the halfway mark. Start hiking at 6:30, stop hiking at 6:30 when it gets dark. And having an alarm at noon to say, okay, here's how far I've gotten today. Let's start plotting where I'm going to be camping at. It's always a good time. Also, I worked out with my family and friends. I would send out a midday message through the Garmin right around noon to kind of update them on how far I've gone, how I'm feeling, all that sort of stuff, just so they have tabs kept on me. So that, a lot of things that this watch can be used for. Would highly recommend carrying one. And it gives you a sick tan line on your wrist. Definitely recommend that. Lastly, your cell phone. This thing, absolute lifesaver. highly recommend having some sort of smartphone with you, because this is where you get your Guthook app. It's where you get your Garmin Earthmate app. It's being able to take notes with just your fingers. It's where you get music. It's where you take pictures. It's where you can take video. You can live stream. Obviously, these things are just miracles in our pockets, and would highly recommend carrying one of these with a good case. Even with this heavy-duty case, the whole back glass of this phone did get shattered when I was out on the trail. So, I don't know, find a case that really works for you as well with it, because it's rugged out there and your equipment will get abused in one way or another. So be sure you have good ways of protecting your equipment when out on trail. I think that just about wraps it up for the miscellaneous equipment, fills in some of the gaps. And I hope that this was somewhat interesting for you guys and helped you guys plan for your trip. Next week's video, as I said, is going to be all about camera gear, and if you want to be sharing your trip, the sort of skills that it takes, I guess, or at least what skills I used most for mine. By no means am I a professional. I'm just as much an amateur at this as anyone else. But I'll share, again, what worked, what didn't, what I wish I did differently, and the equipment that I used for that next week. That kind of wraps it up for the general use case for most people for the trail, though. So I really hope that this series helped you guys out and helped at least give you a start point for where to begin with your gear planning for your fall hike. And as always, if you have any questions, please reach out to trailtime.jake on Instagram. Send me messages there, questions, comments, concerns, anything. Same thing on trailtime96@gmail.com. Send any of your feedback, questions, comments, concerns there. Obviously, there's the comments section down below this video. And if you caught this video right as it came out, the premiere, I'm chilling in the chat right over there, answering any questions that you guys may have. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Please like, comment, and subscribe so you're here for the next video. I really appreciate your support, and I'll see you guys in the next video. You take it easy.